everyone, and welcome back to Wicked Art. It's me, Wicked, again, and we are going to continue forward with our next steps in learning how to draw. So, if you remember last week, we learned how to draw 3D shapes and shade them, with just basic shading. So, remember, this is still just a beginning tutorial level, so we're not going to go super duper refined detail fancy, but we are going to, push it a little bit. Today we're going to be learning how to draw and shade an object by using a reference. So we're going to be using a reference photo. So hopefully you did your homework with drawing your own 3D shapes, because this will help tremendously when you're drawing today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Now we're going to be using this reference image, and it's nothing crazy. As you can see, it is just a simple vase and an apple, and we're going to be shading that in. Now, you can either use your standard number 2 pencil with an eraser, or, my personal favorite is the mechanical pencil. Always have one of these ready too, one of your big erasers. That way you can erase a little bit easier without wearing down the eraser on your pencil. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Now when it comes to drawing objects in your house, or just using a reference in general to try to draw it, we're going to need to break it down by shapes, right? So if you look at the image, we have ourselves an apple, and we have ourselves a vase. Now if we really look closely at it, we can break it down by the shapes that make up the object. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to start with our vase here, and we're going to start with that middle section. If you look closely at it, it's like very wide, and it has that nice rim across the top. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to sketch that out. Now remember to hold your pencil like we showed you, and we're going to sketch that shape out so it's a nice rounded shape. And then we're going to use that ridge on that lip to kind of cut across. Okay, and then if you look, it just kind of rounds out the same way on the other side. So we're just going to sketch that out and round it down towards the bottom as well. Now it's okay, since this is just a beginner level thing, that you don't have to be 100% perfect. Okay, so like I said last week, do not be afraid to make mistakes. Continue to move forward. Don't stop and try to get it perfect and get it right, or it will drive you absolutely insane. As we practice more and more, you will get better and better at it. So I'm just going to close the bottom off with that bottom ridge down there. Okay, and essentially that is the basis of the middle section of our vase. Okay, now we do have that top and bottom ridge to it, so what we can do is we can go ahead and we can sketch that in as well. And please remember, at any time you want to stop and pause the video so you can stay caught up, that is completely okay. Alright, so I'm just going to bring that across and running parallel with it. You notice how I get all these sketchy lines here in the middle? That is fine. Don't let it distract you from continuing to push forward. And I'm just going to round off the edges. Now again, I can clearly look at mine and see that it's not 100% matched up, and that is okay. It's the same basic shape. So don't sit there and beat yourself up on trying to get it perfect, okay? Even I have been drawing for as long as I still make mistakes. I would go back and tweak stuff later, but again, since this is just beginner level, we're not going to stress too much about that, okay? So I'm going to come down here into this area and go ahead and get that bottom ridge that's down there as well. It just kind of pokes out a little bit. So again, you can use the reference that I have up there to try to draw yourself or follow along with me, but the main goal is to look at the reference yourself and try to build those shapes up too, and you'll get plenty of practice with that in the homework. So again, my bottom ridge is kind of thick. It's a lot thicker than the actual vase is, and again, that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and stress and fix it and make it perfect, because we really just need to build up the shape. So since I'm down here, I'm just going to go ahead and stay here, and I'm going to do the rest of the bottom. Now if you look closely at the bottom of the vase, it kind of arches outward first and then rounds out. So you could do it one of two ways. You could just draw out and start going, Or you could do like I like to do. I kind of like to mirror draw a little bit and jump back and forth. So I could easily just round it out just a little bit on both sides. That way I can keep it somewhat even when I go across. Now we're going to kind of make kind of like this smiley face to round the bottom, just like we would any cylinder. But we don't want to do this big huge drag down. It's just a slight curve in the bottom of the vase. Okay. So once that's there, I have the bottom established. I can now start moving back up towards the top. Alright, so now that that vase is sitting there, I can move back up towards the top, and I can start working on things like the huge lip that goes out, or I could start on the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the huge rounded lip for where the water pours out up at the top. So I'm going to start right here on my lip. If you look closely at the image, this actually sticks out some. Alright, so we shouldn't be starting right at the edge. You want to come back almost even where this touches, right here. So just jump up above that area. Okay, and we're just going to lightly sketch. If you notice, it kind of rounds. It's not a straight line. It kind of rounds into this sharp turn right here at the top. Okay, so once we have that, we'll notice that when it comes back, we have this huge back section and then this front section. So the easiest way to get that without overstretching or messing the way it looks is if you look closely at it, right here there's that front edge where it bends back and curves. We can actually draw that, right? We can sketch it out first, and we can bring it downward and start the curve. So we have this huge almost backwards S curve really stretched out. Okay, and it starts to turn out right down towards here. And then instead of just finishing it, I'm going to go ahead and jump to this edge so I can make a slight adjustment. I'm going to do this back edge piece. And I'm going to come up and do a slight curve out and round it. Okay, so I am slowly taking this and building up the shape. So we have this weird swan, Loch Ness monster, whatever you want to call it, looking thing. Now I can look at my image and tell that this piece is probably not as tall as it should be. But again, if we sit here and try to get it perfect, this, maybe 40-minute video to an hour video is going to turn into a 2-hour thing if we keep trying to be perfect. Okay, so don't worry about that. It's all about the practice and getting used to it. Alright, so now if we look back here on this edge, we have this stands alone. We can't really see the back side, but if we move down, we can see the back edge starting to come out. So we can go ahead and we can start from down here in this region, and we can run parallel again right alongside the shape that we have and start to curve ourselves back up towards the top, and then round ourselves towards the front. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of connect them here. So I now have the front part of my vase and then the back part. All that leaves left is our handle. Alright, so we could either start here or we could start here. Now again, if you notice, this vase should technically be curving and going out, but we are not going to sit here and stress about that. Okay, we are just doing our best to learn how to sketch and move forward. And you'll also notice your speed start to increase as you just continue to not care about those little details for now. So I'm going to start here right at the edge of the vase. If you notice, the handle starts, if you look at the picture, it's right here on this edge. So I'm going to go ahead and do this huge curve right here. It goes straight up first, and then it becomes almost like a rainbow. It comes down, and then it starts to take this sharp turn. Okay, as it comes back down, it bends towards the belly of the vase down here. Okay, but I'm going to stop it right here because if you look at the picture, it kind of gets wider as we go out. So we're going to come back to that point. So for now, what I want to do is go ahead and get this inside so I don't get too skinny or mess up the shape of it. So I want to go ahead and come out here to this end where it kind of bulges out. I'm going to go ahead and sketch and curve back inward. Now notice the thickness I'm trying to keep is the same in the picture. So if it's not perfect, don't worry about it, but you shouldn't have something that's super close to your line. You want to try to keep that spacing so that you can continue to curve and keep it even as you work your way down. Okay, it's just nice and smooth transition all the way down to the same spot where we stopped before. Alright, so again, is this handle perfect? No, and that is the intent. That's why you won't see me fix anything. The goal of this video, again, is not to be a perfectionist. It's the learning phases of looking at an object and just going forward with it. Okay, starting to see those flaws but still pushing forward. Now, our vase belly here has the handle connected to it. Alright, so we would visibly be able to see where it attaches here. So if we come down a little bit, we can see where it rounds out, and I'm just going to get that little bit of thickness attached to it where the vase connects at. Okay, so again, not 100% perfect. Could I stretch this down a little bit? Yes. Could I go back and fix this? Yes. But again, I am not stressing about that, and neither should you. We're just going to continue to move forward. Now the other major object that we have in this video, reference image that you can see here, is the apple. Okay, now the apple is essentially just a rounded object, right? It's not anything too hard to draw, but you do have to kind of look closely at it because it's not a perfect circle either. It starts to stretch as it gets towards the bottom. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with a round shape. Now, if you look closely, the apple is sitting in front, right? In front of our vase here. So it's actually going to cross in front of it. So I'm going to stretch while I'm making my circular motion. I'm going to stretch it down. Okay? And then as we get to this point here, when it passes in front of it, it starts to round down away from the vase. Okay, and once we reach the bottom, we can stretch it over. Alright, now again, I like to do, like I said, what I call a mirror draw, where I jump back and forth. This helps me keep things even. So I'm going to work my way back up here to the top, and I'm going to come across and try to get that same distance from the image. So it's not a huge apple, so once I stretch from that midpoint, I can start rounding it again. Okay, as I round to around that same region going across, I'm going to go downward towards the table and just round it off. Okay, so now that was a much easier object for us to draw. Okay, now we want to kind of set the table up so we can at least make it look like it's sitting on something. Now it's not super important how this looks because that's not going to be our main focus for the day. But if you notice, we have a decent distance between, and it kind of goes at an angle. So I'm just going to pass right in front of it, right here. Again, does not have to be perfect to get that table edge. Okay, drop down a little bit more below it and get that second piece of that edge, just so I know it's sitting on a table. Again, it's not super important. Okay, and then to really kind of sell where it's sitting at on the table, I'm going to go ahead and go behind. If you look behind it is the rest of this table sitting up against the wall. So if I just imagine, see how I'm not drawing, if I just imagine it going through and starting again, I can come back here again, imagine it going through and go out the side over here. Okay, so now that we have that set up, we can actually physically see our object sitting on the table. And the one thing we need to do before we start shading this object is we need to take this out, right? Because remember, our apple is sitting in front, so we should not be able to see through our apple unless it was glass or something like that, but it's not. It's a real apple, so it's solid. So we want to now erase. You can use your eraser on your pencil or your big eraser. It doesn't matter. It'll both do the same job. So let's just erase that out so that we just see our apple in the front. Okay, and then we can start with our basic shading to shade this. So we're going to start easy first. I want to start with the apple. I always like to take care of the easiest things first. That way it leaves me more time to, work on the harder things. All right. So the apple's a little bit easier. If you noticed from the image, our sunlight, if my pencil was the light from whatever object, okay, it's coming in this way and hitting the front. So we don't have a whole lot of dark shadows. Now, when drawing an object, the best thing for you to do is if you squint your eyes, like don't close them all the way, but just kind of squint them and look at where all the shadows fall. That will help you see just how much of that shadow darkness is going to come out, and it'll help you set that up right away. So I'm going to squint my eyes. I'm going to look at the edge of that apple, and I notice that the edge point where my shadows are start right here on the side and come out about this far. So I'm lightly, don't press down hard, I'm just pushing harder so you can see better, but you should be pressing super light so you have a little dividing point, just kind of like last week when with the sphere we made our little happy face or crescent kind of stretch across. It's essentially the same thing here. Alright, then up here at the top we have a slight shadow that's coming down this way and coming out. So these are going to be our darkest areas. Now, does that mean that the rest of the apple is getting no shadow whatsoever? No, it does not. Okay. The next thing we want to do is that ground shadow. Now, the thing we're going to do different from the image, because that'll come in something more advanced later. If you notice, the table it's sitting on, or the shelf, is very glossy. It has a sheen to it. So the shadows don't fall like a natural shadow. And it's more of a reflection. So what I'm going to do is just cast the shadow like it would look as if it was sitting on a solid hardwood table. So I'm going to just come here behind the apple, and I'm going to do like we did with our circles last week. I'm just going to make my own shadow, okay, just for the ground shadow. Everything else we'll try to keep accurate with the image, but just so that it's a basic one, we're going to put it out here to the side, okay. Now that that's set up, I can go through my process, okay. Now we are going to be smudging this image. If you don't want to smudge, that's fine. You can choose to just hatch or cross hatch, because either way I'm going to start with both. I'm going to start hatching first, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to cross hatch to darken up some areas, and then I'm going to smudge to finally round it out, okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to pick a direction. Alright, so I'm going to choose, I always like to go at angles, that way you can easily crisscross. So I'm going to go ahead and choose and to come down this way. Now again, the closer your lines are together, the darker it will be. But remember, it is not a scribble motion. You are picking your pencil up every single time to go down your object. Now, I'm not changing direction. So as I go down the apple, I'm not going to start turning this way. I am going to keep it that same direction. But if you notice that little line that I have here as my kind of midpoint of where the shadow tone will start to change majorly, I'm going to leave some going over the edge. And that usually comes into play for the smudging to help spread it out farther. But I'm going to continue to pick my pencil up, go one direction, and go down the side of my apple, all the way down to the bottom where it stops. Okay. The next thing I want to do, if you remember from last week, we want to get that ground shadow shaded in. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pick me a direction, and I'm just going to go across without changing at an angle. And because it is a ground shadow, I'm going to keep them tones even, so I'm not going to space it out too much. Alright. So you can already see by the little bit that we've done, we're already starting to round this object and really make it stick out. Now again, is this professional grade level? No, we're learning from the beginning, okay? So we need to take care of our little shadow area up here at the top. So let's go ahead and do that and run ourselves down and hatch that in, okay? And then we're all set up. Now one thing that we need to notice If you look down at the picture, down here at the apple where it's touching the ground, if you've ever taken any object, like I said, and just placed it, you can see a dark line that goes underneath it. That's the touching point of where the shadow touches. So that can actually just be darkened. You can come in and darken that area right down there at the bottom, because that's where the shadow is reflecting exactly where the bottom of the apple is touching. Okay, so I can go ahead and make that area dark. We also have the outer ridge of our apple has a darkest point on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. And the reason why I'm doing this is it's probably not any way anybody else would teach you, but I do notice when you tend to smudge, it can start to fade your line work. So some of the line work that's important we need to keep. So I'm just darkening that back edge along with that bottom. Now I can get in to the cross hatching. Okay, so if I went this way, I just want to pick a different direction. I can go straight up and down. I can go at the complete opposite angle. It doesn't matter. That is completely your choice. Now I'm going to go straight up and down because as I work my way out, I can start spacing the line work out, because remember, as I cross over, I'm not pressing any harder. It will start darkening up this apple. The closer my lines are together, the darker it's going to get. Okay, the more I space them out, it won't darken it up as much. So I'm going to start here back on this edge, and I'm just going to go one direction. And I'm going to start with them pretty close together. So you can already see that this is getting darker in here. Now, as I start to get about halfway before this line, so I can see a little space here, I'm going to start spacing it out more. They're not going to be as close. Okay, and then I'm going to have very few lines coming out here. Okay, again, doesn't look like much right now, but you'll see it better when we smudge. Okay, now this outside, because it is sitting right here, and this is where you have to practice drawing things in real life, because you can start to learn how light hits and reflects, and as well as shadows too. So because these two objects are so close, we are actually seeing this dark edge here, not because of the apple, because if you notice, it gets dark about right here and then it stops. Well, it's actually a shadow cast from your vase reflecting off each other, bouncing back and forth in here. Okay, so that's why we're not taking it all the way down. This is from the vase itself. Alright, now if we look back this area, this should probably be cross hatched a little bit. So I'm going to pick a different direction and I'm going to just cross hatch out just a tad. Now notice how I'm not going all the way to the edge. I'm just coming out from the apple itself and stopping about right here. Okay, so now that that is set up, that's all I'm doing for the apple right now at this moment. Alright, just at this moment. So now I'm going to move on to the vase. Again, let's squint our eyes and really look at that. If we really look at it, we'll see there's a huge chunk of shadow that comes out here, right? So if we squint while we're sketching, we can open our eyes every so often when we need to, but it's going to curve and come this way, right? So I'm going to lightly place a line here. Again, I'm going to do it darker so you can see it better, but on your paper it should be lighter. Okay, so I'm going to squint and look and check at the next area. Comes in about right here. I'm going to squint again and I start seeing the curve back. Okay, so it's going to follow along. So notice how I shifted out because I noticed that the curve causes the shadow to bump out. So I'm going to start curving right next to this apple and curve and follow that vase. Again, I'm going to go darker so you can see it. And it's going to follow it all the way up to that ridge. Now, when we hit the ridge, notice how when you squint your eyes, the shadow kind of bumps inward. So it makes this kind of tiny little arch right here where the shadow falls over the lip. Okay, squint your eyes again and it starts back out here again. And if you look closely, it doesn't just follow parallel with this line. This shadow, because of the way the lip bends outwards towards us, we are able to take it and go almost straight up right here to this rounded part right here. Okay, so that's going to be your mid-tone setup for your shadow there. Well, let's look around again. Do we have other shadows that we can see? Well, yes. Down in here again, if you look closely, squint those eyes, you can see that shadow starting to drag itself all the way across the vase and then kind of curve up right to here. Okay. Now, it doesn't do that down here. Well, why is that? Well, the way the shadows fall, right? This part right here is poking out. It's not as far out as this because this is curving under, right? So the way the light hits it, it rolls and falls off underneath. Where these two parts are rolling outwards to face us. So there's more surface that can get the light and no crevices for it to hide in. So because this is a rounded belly area that rounds under, we can see more shadow down here. So if I continue to squint and look around my picture, I can see one more area, and that's up in here, okay? So up here in this area, I have a shadow that kind of arches right in here. Alright. Now, we look one more place. We can see shadows on our handle, but if you notice, really look, it's just the edges of them. Okay, so much like with the apple, there's a darkened edge here. There's a darkened edge on this side, everywhere that the light is not. Because remember, this here is actually the back edge on the far side. So that means technically this, if you stop and look at the picture, there's this glinting light that goes down. Well, that's the actual front edge of that handle. So this is going to get some shading in it, but we're just going to go ahead and darken up this inside edge. Okay, remember, this is just basic shading. So this inside edge is going to get darkened. And then go ahead and do it for the top side edge. Just stretch it until you get to the top, and we stop there. Now the same is true if you squint those eyes. This edge line going all the way up will work the same way. Start at the top, start at the bottom, it does not matter. We're just going to go in and darken that edge. Okay, so now that that's in there, I'm just going to continue to follow the shapes that I have, going down my vase all the way to the apple. Okay, I'm going to come down this way and hit that up as well and get those edges, and then bring it down towards the bottom. Now, before we do the rest, we also have to get the ground shadow for this particular object. Okay, again, since it's a reflective surface, I would honestly just be drawing another thing, but we don't want to get that advanced right now. So I'm just going to cast a basic shadow coming out from the bottom of this that will wrap around and touch the edge of this apple. Okay, and in this back area here, I'm just going to put a slight little arch right there to represent that. Okay, nothing fancy, just something to show that it is sitting on the ground. So now that we've done that, we can start with our hatching, right? So just like with the apple, I picked a direction to go. Well, I'm going to do the same thing up here at the top. I'm going to start at an angle and pick me a direction, and I'm going to hatch. Again, not a scribble. I am going and picking my pencil up every single time to make a direction. Doesn't matter if you go this way or this way, but you do need to pick your pencil up and go the same direction. Again, once we reach this line, you can allow for a little overhang. You can have a few extra pieces that hang over the edge of it. That is 100% okay. So I'm going to just continue to work my way down and hatch that direction, one line at a time. So if this is a really bright surface and there was like no shadow whatsoever, you would really be spacing these lines out. Since this is almost like a white porcelain, our lines aren't going to carry over more. There's going to be more light than there is darkness. Okay, But if you were drawing a different object at the house, then it probably would have more shadow covering. Again, it just depends whether it's sunlight hitting it, a lamp light, or whatever. We're just going to shade this out. Okay. Now notice when I get down here to the bottom, you are going to be tempted to turn yourself and go this way. Don't do that. Just start spacing it out in the same direction. I'm keeping my shadow going the same way, same angle the whole way across. Okay. Have a little bit of overhang. It's 100% okay. Now I need to do this bottom area, so I'm going to keep my angles the same. Maybe stretch out just a little bit past our line, and do the same thing with this bottom area here. Okay, so that takes care of that part. Now I have this upper region, which is a little bit easier. We can keep those lines closer together and just hatch ourselves in that entire area right there. Alright, and then the rest of it, if you squint your eyes again, this right here is a ridge line. Okay, so this is the part that hangs under. It folds under. It literally curves and goes under. So this you want to kind of darken up a little bit, not black, but just kind of darken it up and follow that ridge line all the way across, because that's how it curves under. Alright, now with the bottom it's not that way because the curve is not as intense, but we do want to extend it out just a little. Okay, so again, squinting those eyes will help you pick up on those extra shadows there. But where we do want to do it though is right in here, because remember the belly is rounding under, so it meets almost at like a point in the middle, like a triangle. So that fold will have that darkness in there. Alright, now if you remember, we went ahead and did our ground shadow first, so let's do that and then we'll darken that bottom touching point. So let's go ahead and hatch in that ground shadow. Okay, so once that's hatched in, I can now come in here and carry that bottom point that is touching the ground. We're going to carry that all the way across because that is there. It doesn't matter how much light is there, it is visible because that is touching the ground. Okay, then I'm going to do a slight cross hatch. I'm not going to carry it all the way edge to edge. Okay, just a slight cross hatch on the ground. So I hatched one direction. Now I'm going to hatch the other direction with a cross hatch. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to pick a direction. I'm going to go straight up and down. Now the parts that I'm closest to the edge on, I'm going to keep my lines closer together. Just like with the apple, you're just going to have to control it more. Okay, as I move away and come out, I'm going to space them out more. Okay, it's not going to be as close. So I'm going to space them out as I move away. So I'm going to come back here. Again, not changing directions. I'm still going up and down. I'm going to keep my lines close together first. Then as I get about right here, just before I hit the line, I'm going to start stretching it out. Okay, I'll move down some more and do the same process. So this region should be a little bit darker. So if you have to go over it a couple more times just to darken it up, the region closest to the edge should be darker. So down here at the bottom, we can do a light pass first, just to stretch some lines up there. Okay, then we can come down here and hit up this area, which should be darker in here. Okay, and then space that out, and then hit up this edge and do the same thing and space that out. Alright, now squint your eyes again, look up in this region right here. Okay, we have a very light, so we're gonna do some spacing with our shading. Notice how I am not putting them super close together. okay, if you can see that. But if you notice, it's a lot lighter looking than what's over here. So for these really light regions, when you do that, sometimes it's best to just do a light hatch and not the cross hatch. Okay, so if I squint my eyes again, I can see this underside. I'm going to go through here and do a light hatching close to the edge down here in this region. Again, we are doing the basic shading on here, okay? So we're not focused on getting 100% everything correct, alright? So now that that's done, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to darken these edges that represent my table just so they stand out more, okay? So notice I'm doing them very sketchy, and it'll kind of look cool with the picture, so don't stress about it. I'm just going to go back over them again and just kind of darken them. Okay. Now, if you look at our image with the hatching that we have, you could technically leave it like this. You've technically shaded your picture in a very basic way. Okay. But if you remember, I said we were going to be smudging. That's my favorite form of shading. I like how it softens everything, and then we can go back and touch some stuff up. But for now, we can either use your pinky or this finger. I don't know what it is. I've tried every finger, and I don't know what it is about it, but you seem to get more oil from your finger from these two. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's a scientific reason. If you know, you can let me know in the comments, but I don't know. I've just always found these two fingers better. Or what you can do is you can take some paper and you can roll it up and use that to kind of help push it. I actually like feeling what it is I'm doing, but again, that's up to you. Okay, so I'm going to start here on my apple. Alright, now we're going to put some pressure, but not a lot. I'm going to press down just enough so we can see it. See how it's starting to smooth it? Just enough that I can see it smooth my shading out. Okay, so if I squint my eyes and look at the image, right here in this area is where most of that direct light is hitting. So I can actually carry this over because I have this residue on my finger. I can round this and carry it on over to the region to the side over here. Okay, so if you notice, I'm leaving this kind of circular shape here. Now, is it that bright there? No. Now I can barely touch the paper with my finger. Okay, barely touch the paper, and I'm going to kind of use that residue on my finger to kind of fill it in with a light gray. Right? Now, the reason why I showed you both fingers is, let's say you're rubbing, and maybe you're rubbing too hard, and this starts to hurt. You can just switch to the other finger and continue. Okay, so you're really just trying to evenly smooth it out until you get towards that center. Okay, so see how I've got this little bit of white left here, right? So with the ground shadow, it's real simple. All you gotta do is make all those sketchy lines smooth out. Okay, you don't have to press real hard, just kind of go over it in a circular motion and just really make those lines just kind of smooth out so that it's a smooth surface. Alright, so the apple was much easier, right? So we got ourselves a nice basic shaded image. So look at the two side by side. Again, you could leave it like this and not smooth it out, but in my personal opinion, I just think everything looks nicer and more refined. But if you notice, when you were doing that, some of your lines may or may not have faded, right? But see, because we started with this dark, it didn't disappear that much, and it allows for that smoother transition. It carries that dark over here and really spreads it. Okay, so as much as you need to go over it to make it look smooth to your liking, remember, art is art. It's subjective, so no way is perfect in the other. Okay, but if it looks good in the way you like it, then you can leave it as that. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to this vase here. Okay, so we're going to do the exact same thing that we did to the apple. I'm going to start here over here in this region, and I'm just going to apply some pressure, not a lot. I'm not trying to rip the skin off my finger. Okay, and I'm really going to start smoothing that out. Okay, Now, for those of you that are worried about what's getting on your finger, I promise if you just take some water and run it over and rub it together, it comes clean, okay? But I'm just going to continue to smooth that out, at least in the areas that are already marked, right? So I'm going to come to each area and smooth it. Okay, I have my top region up here I need to smooth out. Right? So now that I have that set up, I do have this area in here. So see how it's smaller? I'm just going to use my pinky to smooth that. And then I'm going to come up through here. Now, when you get into this area, see how skinny it is? This is where a rolled up piece of paper would probably work. But you can still get this and really smooth that out. And then if you look, you probably may not be able to see it on my camera, but you should see it on your paper. It kind of filled in this middle area. So you can just take the eraser on your pencil and erase what you over smudged, right? And it'll brighten that back up again, okay? And if you faded anything or accidentally erased anything, you can just bring it back, okay? Now, we need to squint our eyes. We need to look at this picture. How far does it carry it over? Well, remember what I said. This is a white vase. So it doesn't carry too much, but it does carry some, right? So I'm going to use that residue on my finger, and I'm going to spread this just slightly out some more. So just kind of come to each edge and go back and forth and just slightly use the residue on your finger to space it out. And then you can go back over this area to kind of smooth it some more. But what it'll do is leave a faint shadow, right? I want to hit up this outer edge just a tad, and if it overextends, like see here I got it too thick, I can cut that back down with my eraser and get it closer to the dark shadow on the edge. Okay, so again, this all just going to take practice. Like see how I over smudged here past my edge? I can just erase that back to the edge. Okay, I also have to squint and look. Like this area is still white, but it does have, like we did here, it does have that little bit of edge that gets a darkened area on it. Okay, so those are things you have to pick up on when you're squinting. Again, we had this whole bottom lip here, so since that's faded now, we need to kind of bring that back. So you can lightly take your pencil and just kind of go over that area. Okay, we can do the same thing with kind of the top here and just extend it a little bit. Okay, any of that sketchiness that you may have had in there, we can kind of smooth out as well. Alright, now we need to take care of our ground shadow. Okay, that's all that's left is that ground shadow. We're going to go like that and just lightly smooth that. Remember, just until it's smooth. You just don't want to see any more of those lines anymore. Okay, so for the most part, we have ourselves a shaded image, right? So what I can do from here is you can add a little extra flair to it. Okay, so just so it stands out. So like me, I'm just gonna lightly, not dark, I'm just gonna go back over this line. Okay, not pressing down hard, I'm just redrawing it almost. Okay, same thing with this front one. I'm gonna go back over that. Okay, now since this is a more reflective surface, there would be things like in here where it'd be a glare effect and stuff like that. But again, me personally, I consider that to be more advanced and come in a later video. But to add a little bit more flair, we can use all this buildup we got on our fingers now. Okay, why waste it, right? So I can come in here down towards the bottom and just kind of spread out. I'm not pressing down hard at all. I'm literally just using the residue on my finger to kind of fill it in and just pretend like, hey, that's the color of the shelf. It's like a brown, right? It'll make it stand out a little bit more, and it'll blend softer with the shadows too on the ground. Okay, other things you could do, and you don't have to do this part. Okay, you can perfectly stop right here if you want, but I like taking that residue, right, and going behind it and adding these little squigglies with that stuff, because what that'll do is it'll make that background come to the foreground and force your objects to stand out more. Okay, so it's not super 100% visible right now on my camera. Like I said, I'm working on getting a better one. But when you see it on your paper, you'll notice that this is popping more. It's sticking out more. It's almost like there's a wall cast shadow behind it, so you could like come in here and rub a little bit more and get some more on your finger and extend that out. Okay, so this was a basic shading tutorial using a reference as a drawing, right? So you are now learning how to look at objects and break them down one shape at a time. We went middle and broke down each shape, right? What I want you to do for homework, and this will make you so much better, okay, especially when we start getting into the next stuff for next week. At home, what I want you to do for your homework is each day I want you to take 30 minutes or so, find an object in your house, put it under a lamp, or turn the kitchen light on and set it at the table. You can take a object, maybe two objects, set them next to each other, try to draw it, and try to shade it. The more you practice it, the better you'll get. Now, you don't have to set up a full sheet like this. You could start in the corner and like take your computer mouse, set it down, draw a computer mouse here, move over, draw something else. Or if you want to do the whole scene like this, that is fine. Okay, but this is just basic beginner level shading. I hope you learned something from it, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to, you can share your picture with me on your Twitter account. On my Twitter account, you can send me a picture at WickedArt5. And if not, you can leave me a comment down below and tell me what you thought. Again, I hope you learned something from this, and I cannot wait to see what you guys do with it. And until the next video, keep sketching, and I'll see you next time.